Good evening and welcome to the Pittsburgh Public Schools Policy Workshop. Today is Monday, February 17th, 2025. My name is Jamie Petrosky and I am chair of the policy committee. And tonight we will be reviewing one policy, the public participation in board meetings policy, which is 1001.1. This policy is ready for consideration by the board. Immediately following tonight's policy workshop, we will have a conversation with Ben Mackey, who is joining us from the Council of Great City Schools, sharing information on the public engagement conversation. So for the policy workshop portion, I will be turning it over to Miss Elizabeth Sattler, an attorney with WBK Legal, to lead the policy workshop. Please, Miss Sattler.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to share my policy workshop PowerPoint. Can everybody see this? Okay. So this is a revision to a policy, and I should probably go back and ask, would you prefer to see the policy itself while we go through it, or just the workshop PowerPoint?
We could just go through the PowerPoint.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing, this is obviously policy 1001.1, which governs the school district's public participation in board meetings. It is an existing policy and we are looking to amend it. The purpose of this policy is as follows. The board recognizes the value to school governance of public comment on education issues and the importance of involving members of the public in board meetings. We are revising this policy to update the parameters by which the public may participate in the monthly public hearings. The first revision, and this is similar to the last policy, is that the school district will continue to require participants to submit the following information to the board secretary prior to the meeting: name of the speaker, topic to be addressed, group affiliation if applicable, and then a new question will be whether the speaker plans to testify in person or virtually. We are taking out the address of the speaker, as that is no longer, it's best that we don't need to ask for that information. The order of the speakers will be determined by this policy and the board secretary who will take in all of the applications to speak and put them in the order. Within this policy, all persons planning to speak in person in conference room A at the administration building shall give their testimony first. Within that group, the following order shall be followed. Speakers indicating they wish to discuss a topic on the next upcoming legislative agenda shall go first. Speakers indicating they wish to discuss a matter of concern which is not on the upcoming legislative agenda will go second. And if a speaker did not indicate a topic when they registered to speak, they will go at the end of this particular group. After all the in-person speakers are finished, the board will move to the virtual testimony. All persons who speak virtually will give their testimony after the in-person speakers have concluded. Again, within this group, speakers indicating they wish to discuss a topic on the next upcoming legislative agenda shall go first, followed by speakers who indicate they wish to discuss a matter of concern, but which is not up on the upcoming agenda. And finally, speakers who did not indicate a topic when they registered to speak. Other updates or continuations of the previous policy are: the 3-minute time limit remains. No speaker shall be able to convey the remainder of his or her time to another speaker. Written testimony will still be accepted and is encouraged. It will be posted and made available to the public after the meeting. Updated regulations regarding the prohibition of communication devices, including but not limited to sign, carpet squares, etc., will be included. The meetings will continue to be recorded and available to the public. And administrative regulations will be drafted to create an online registration system for speakers upon the passing of this updated policy. And that is pretty much the conclusion of the changes. I'm going to leave this slide up with the other updates, but I can certainly go back if anybody has any other questions about a particular provision in the policy.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Sattler. Are there any questions from board members at this time? Or comments? Doesn't have to be questions. Okay. Director Walker, please.
Thank you. So I don't necessarily have any questions about the changes. I think they all make sense, and they are logical. I have a question around, and this kind of comes with a huge caveat, understanding that our current policy approval process requires this workshop and then a 30-day comment period before it's put on the agenda. So recognizing all of that, Liz, is there anything that legally stops us from fast tracking this and getting it on this month's agenda, since we've already had 7 to 8 months worth of comment regarding this policy and the public's desire to have it implemented?
No, I think the board can decide to put it on this month's, you mean have it in 2 days?
Yes.
No, typically the 30, I don't think, I think that the board can go ahead and do that if you all agree to do that. However, without the 30-day time for comment, you may get questions or concerns about that, not having that opportunity for other people who may be on this call to review the policy.
That is my question. Normally,
yeah.
99.999% of the time, right, the policies are not something that have been discussed at,
right.
at length
The only
for months and months and months. And so my only reason in asking is obviously a 30-day period creates a scenario where it can't be implemented until April,
that's correct.
Which now creates another 60 days from today before we can do this. So
I would just add, and I do not mean to interrupt you, that you may want to talk to the administration or have them weigh in, because they need to create administrative regulations in a sign-up process. So they need some time to do that before this can be implemented. And so I would just, and that would be more about the effective date of the policy. You could still discuss it on Wednesday and have an effective date to allow them enough time to do that.
Well, and are we suggesting that the sign-up policy is vastly different than what we currently have, aside from the order that we're putting the speakers in?
No, I believe there was some comment when we all spoke about this earlier about having the agenda available so that people could pick or choose agenda items if that's what they wanted to talk about. Otherwise, they would have to type them in. But I think that Dr. Walters should speak to that, or someone from the administration.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Ms. Talaferro.
Thank you, Ms. Petrowski. So I guess a quick question I had, and I don't know if it's my screen or the screen itself, but it's not all the way scrolled up. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, that was me. I apologize. I was trying to see you and look at it, and it's hard to do.
I won't stay long, but the I guess the last bullet point about the administrative regulations online. So is that saying that that needs to be in the ARs, because we already have an online system for registration that was created some time ago, like a year or so ago, maybe 2 years.
Correct. No, we could take that out, or we could, if the administration still wants to have regulations, they certainly could. When we spoke earlier about this, that was what was conveyed to me, that the administration would create regulations, creating this online registration system. But if there is one in existence that is able to be used, and that the administration feels that they can use to put people in their right place in the order, then we could take that out. You could pass it and we could take that out for passing.
Yes. Sorry, Ms. Talaferro, to add, for part of the committee's conversation. Like, yes, we already have the online registration system, so this would be to update it to include that, like, either a drop down or a box to say like, oh, I want to talk about item 12.1.
Mhm.
If that's what they want to either type in or have a drop down box. And so that mechanism, whether like it's a drop down, a type in, or something else, a subject, I guess is really the best way to put it. You know, the administration could determine how they want to collect that information. So to whatever's easiest for them.
Okay, so we're not saying that we need to, like, that we need to change in terms of adding things to it,
Right.
but we're not trying to take
Right.
it away.
Right.
correct?
Right.
Well, we work real hard on out of the,
Yeah.
you know, the dark ages and having an online system.
Yeah,
for-
more of an update. Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
that's helpful. And then I guess that first, I think it was the slide before this, that just mentioned the board secretary portion of it. Oh, I guess it was two
Oh,
slides.
creates the following order. This one, as determined by this
The one-
policy.
maybe
And
the one before this one.
okay,
What?
hold on. Let me keep going back.
Sorry. Yes, this one.
Okay. Mhm.
So I guess the wording looked weird to me, and maybe this is just because it's like a, you know, you're explaining what the policy says, but
Mhm.
the way that is written, but it just looked weird to me that this was following like the old procedure where the board secretary had to capture this information. So I just wanted to just be sure that wasn't the case either. And then part of the reason why I'm asking these questions is because when we actually created the online form, that obviously never was written into policy. So I want to make sure that that wording is, since we're updating our policy on public hearings, you know, public hearing procedures, I just want to make sure that it is documented that there is now a online system for this, instead of how it used to be when our board secretary got phone calls and had to, you know, keep track of it that way. So I just want to make sure that that is not, that is reflected in this policy.
Okay. And it's, well, then we should probably consider, so I can pull up that paragraph if you would like me to, because it's not, I think that you would want something else. Let me pull up, if it's okay, the red line version.
Absolutely.
Okay, can you see this? Is this everybody see the red line version?
Not yet.
You may have to stop share and reshare. Liz,
Oh,
to change-
sorry.
No, that's okay.
Sorry. All right, now let's try this again. Share. Yeah. Okay, do you see it now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so down here on public hearings. Okay, so here's where you're talking about, Devin, right here. So it does still say if you're wishing to participate, you have to register their intent with the board secretary in advance of the meeting. Would you like this to change to say you have to register online?
Well, I mean, it's still going to the board secretary.
Secretary,
That part I
yes.
do understand, but I'm just
Yes.
wondering if it would be beneficial, since we are doing this update now, to specify that it's
So
online.
how about,
registration
well,
is-
how about I take, because we don't, so, okay, how about if we put in here, shall register their intent with the board secretary via the, is it on the, it's on the website, correct?
Mhm.
Via
Because
a
I
link?
think, Liz, too,
Yeah.
sorry
That's
to
okay.
interrupt, but because I think some of this would be determined in the administrative regulation as well, because
Yes.
if Ms. Rinaldi would want to have phone calls, or if there's somebody who doesn't have online access,
Okay.
they'd still be able to call the district. So I think, or call the board secretary, excuse me, because it used to be, it may still be, like, the website still has like the phone number listed.
Okay.
So the district would have to, you know, update in their AR and update the website, you know, based on really this information. Like, we have the online form, but I believe there would still be the option to make a phone call.
Okay.
In case somebody for some reason is like, I don't want to fill out the online form, or I can't.
Okay.
But
So then
that's
do you-
not my determination. So
So then Jamie, that makes it sound like you would like to leave this as is, except for perhaps that last sentence, because we don't, unless the administrative regulation will be created quickly. Otherwise, we could just leave it as is and have the administration work on the AR while this goes into effect.
Yeah, my understanding was like during the 30-day comment period, the AR
Right.
can kind of be built, and then if and when passed, based on comments or not, it can kind of all just happen in tandem.
Okay. So that would be if we went through the 30-day period route. And if not, then it would probably just have to play a little catch up.
Yeah. Or again,
Okay.
as you mentioned, like an effective date. So like
Right.
had this passed, then there's an effective date, and then the administration still has X number of days, a period of time, to update the AR.
Okay. Okay.
So I don't know
Yes.
if Dr. Walters or anybody from the administration has thoughts on that currently. I don't want to force people to raise their hands.
The only piece I'd add to the conversation is that the administration would need time to develop whatever those changes are, because I'm not sure what the actual structural changes would be. But I know one of them would be, of course, to designate whether they would like to testify online or in person. That's another piece. And then there's an organizational piece that the policy speaks about in organizing the actual testimonies. And there was a space where I thought in the pre-policy committee meeting that there was a conversation about referencing the actual agenda items so that there could be clarity around alignment between those things that they're testifying on versus other things that individuals wanted to testify about. And so that would take some time to create that construct, not only with administration, but also to create some comfort with the board secretary about how she would like to organize that.
Right. Great. Thank you, Dr. Walters, for your input.
And when you say take some time, like how much time do you anticipate that something like that can and will take?
So I haven't investigated it right now in space. Because I was going through the process. So I thought that once the 30-day piece would come, then I can begin the investigative process around what it takes to do so. I've had some preliminary conversations with the team, but we did not land on an actual time for doing so.
Okay. I mean, would consider like, I mean, I don't know if.
I wouldn't say 6 months if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I just would take into consideration, like, okay, when we built the online, the online form, like, with that knowledge is, that part is already easy, like it's already done. That part is done. So you're just adding tabs and things like that. So I just would be curious to know what the time frame is. I'm not trying to like rush you guys through it either, but it would be helpful to like, if we're going to take into consideration foregoing the 30-day comment period, if that's not realistic, then we should just say that it's not realistic because it's going to take you 30 days to figure it out. But I'll let you work with your team to figure that part out.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I guess, I think, thank you, first of all, to the policy committee for taking this back and working on this policy. I understand the need and the push to get things back online, virtual testimony sooner rather than later. But this policy hasn't been really worked on or dealt with or addressed for quite some time. And we have created a habit for ourselves as a board, and I would say we, because we are a board of 9 people, not one person, that we've created a habit of not following policy that are our own policies as a board. And I don't want to continue to feed into that habit, especially in the space that we are in terms of working on having better board governance practices. So it may not be ideal if we go through the 30-day comment period and not have to or be able to implement this until April 1, let's say. But I'd rather get it right, do the work and get it right, than for us to continue to operate and function in a way that is not reflective of what we say that we want to do, which is to be better better at governance as a board. So, I mean, I think the work that went into this and kind of creating a better framework, I feel good about. I would be interested in knowing what the public might have to say about this format. It is different than what we traditionally have done in the past. But like I said, we have outdated policies and practices for the board in itself. And I think, at a board in 2025 that's still functioning from board policies from, who knows when. I think it's a good move and a good step in a direction that we can do better at governing as a board, and also be able to be more accessible to the public. So thank you again to the committee for working on this and creating language, better language in the policy. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Talaferro. Yeah, this policy in particular hadn't been updated since 2012, so it was long time due anyway. I did see hands earlier from Dr. Reed and Ms. Silk, so I do want to give you the opportunity in case they came down for some reason. And I do see Ms. Wilson has her hand up now in case Dr. Reed or Ms. Silk change their mind again. Go ahead, Ms. Wilson, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I just wanted to let you know that my question got answered.
Okay.
So I'm fine.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Wilson.
Okay, I'm sorry for being late, so if this was brought up, I apologize. But in thinking about the group, someone that doesn't live in our district, but they're representing a group, I wondered if we gave some thought to what Philadelphia does if there is a group that is not legitimately in the city of Pittsburgh, but they're speaking on behalf of having only one person represent, so we're not having 20 of them, 20 represents, speaking all on the same topic. In Philadelphia, they have one person speak for that group. And I wondered if we gave any thought to that.
To my knowledge, and I will let Ms. Sattler and Mr. Weiss chime in, because I think if we didn't allow people each individually to speak, it would violate sunshine, but I am not a lawyer, so I will leave it to our lawyers to answer the
And
rest of
I'm not talking about just anybody. I'm talking about specifically if they're representing a group, but they don't really live in the city of Pittsburgh. That's a little bit different, I believe.
Yes, it's different in the sense that if no one is a resident, if they don't otherwise have some sort of tie to the district, except for that particular group. I was not aware that Philadelphia does that. I can certainly look into that and see what they do. Although, Ms. Wilson, you probably just said exactly what they do. I'm trying to think of the way you would want to word that so that it was clear that you want to hear the message, but you don't want to hear it 15 times in a row. So I can certainly look into that when we're concluding this call and let everybody know. Ira, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, the act says that in order to have a right to speak, you must be a resident or a taxpayer of in this case, the school district. So I think if you want to place a limitation on a non-resident speaking for a group, you could do that. But let's look at what Philadelphia has and maybe have a conversation with their law department and see if we can come up with.
Okay, I'd like that. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Any other questions, comments from board members at this time? Going once, twice. Okay. Seeing none, I want to thank all of the folks who helped revise this policy. And I will adjourn the public policy workshop. And at this time, I will hand it over to Mr. Walker for the second portion of tonight's meeting.
All right. Thank you all, Ms. Sattler, Jamie, and the policy committee for your work on this. I look forward to discussing it some more. So the next part, and I appreciate and thankful for the board for providing some additional time to have this next conversation. Because I know how busy the next couple of weeks are, I was trying to avoid extra meeting days. And so this allowed us to do that. As a part of our continued work around our governance policies and the way that we do our work, part of this involves some community listening to help us create some community goals that will then go into the superintendent's annual evaluation and reporting. And so with that, I will turn it over to Ben Mackey from the Council of the Great City Schools to walk us through this framework and conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, President Walker, Board of Trustees, administration. It's great to be here with you. Excited to talk about this community listening. First, I want to recognize the work that this board and administration have done around putting the priorities first. Over the last few months, Pittsburgh Public School Board has really engaged in monitoring progress towards the annual goals this year that have been set. So whether it's reading or science or math, really engaging in that topic and understanding the progress. I just want to give you all a shout out because that is very hard work to stay focused on that. And y'all are moving in that direction. And the purpose of this conversation, though, is while Pittsburgh Public Schools has a set of really strong goals this year that we're looking at, the real question as Pittsburgh Public Schools looks forward into the next 3, 4, or 5 years is to make sure that the goals that this board decides to focus on actually have community input. And we know that we've heard from the community as well as from administration on setting what those goals are going to be, that we can feel comfortable saying we're going to align our resources and our priorities around achieving those. So this hopefully will not actually take that much time on a presentation. We'll get to hear your feedback, but you all have seen this a number of times. I thank the board for all individually providing to me thoughts around what should be included in a community listening setup, et cetera. And so now I've taken a number of iterations of feedback from each of y'all and put together one draft plan that if this board looks at it and doesn't have substantial other changes tonight, we will begin to work with administration and board services to finalize the details, coordinate those logistics with the board, and then begin to work with you all to communicate this to the community about listening sessions happening this spring. So real quick, I'll walk through. I have a few slides to show, so I will pull up my slides and make sure you can see them. All right, I think y'all can see the slides. Everyone good there? All right. So high level, again, the purpose of this is the Pittsburgh Public School Board of Directors is finalizing this plan to really understand what the community wants both our students to know and be able to do, those goals, as well as what are the values that we really hold dear in Pittsburgh Public Schools, that while you pursue those goals, we cannot sacrifice these things. This community listening and all the feedback that comes from it will be one pillar of what the board uses to finalize goals for the organization going forward. It'll be matched with also your administration, who are experts in the field and are doing this work day in and day out, with their understanding of the biggest gaps in the needs and how to focus there. And you're going to marry those two and actually decide on your priorities. There were 5 major things that came up from directors writ large when talking about what needed to be true for Pittsburgh Public Schools listening sessions. The first one is that there is accessibility, that folks have an opportunity to weigh in and provide this feedback, whether or not they can attend an actual meeting in person. The board will likely host these meetings in person, but also made it clear that when we do have them there, we should have a translator available to help translate the conversation, that we should have Zoom or virtual sessions for folks who might not be able to attend an in-person community meeting, and also that there could be, where possible, childcare, and or we have a survey that people that can't make it to any of these live can fill out a survey on their own time. The second thing is that these discussions should result in building trust. This is not, we don't go to the community just once upon a time and that's it, and we get something and they're like, wonder what happened with those. The goal of this is to actually build trust with the community, to hear them, first of all, to turn that into goals and guardrails or values, and then use that as a jumping off point to go back and communicate. Here's what we heard, and here's where the board is prioritizing. Then when the community tunes in over the next year, they're actually going to see the board focusing on those things that came from this listening session. The third thing that came out is making sure that there are consistent and clear expectations that no matter where a listening session is happening in the city, it should feel the same and solicit the same information so that everyone's voice is heard in the same manner and that certain groups get the same experience as other certain groups. The next thing was around multiple opportunities for engagement. We wanted to make sure that this is focused on quality and that the community actually shares their perspective. This is not a time for trustees to share their perspective, but really to hear from these different communities about what they want for their school systems. And that goes into the last one about letting the community speak, really setting this in a way, and you'll spend time in a moment on the questions to ask, with open-ended questions, really trying to hear the heart of what the community wants for its students and the values it wants to hold dear, and then turning that into the goals and the guardrails. So all of that, we kind of came to some specific questions. And where we've landed is 4 distinct questions that would be the same, whether it was an in-person meeting, a Zoom meeting, or on the survey. The first 2 questions would be around really ascertaining the vision for our students. What do we want kids to know and be able to do by the time they leave a particular grade level or they leave our system? The first question being, what are the most important things that Pittsburgh Public School students should know or be able to do because of their time here? And leaving it open-ended, so if someone is really passionate about their time in an elementary school, they can speak to that. They can also speak to graduation day or whenever. And then after each individual or the groups at the community meetings actually generate all of these different things that are important, we'll ask them to prioritize. In groups, if they are at the meetings, or individually if they're on a survey, they'll actually prioritize those. And if we can only choose 2 of those things to focus on, which 2 are the most important? And then we will repeat that process with values. So the vision is focused on what students know and can do. Values could be anything else. What are those other things that we should avoid, we should stop doing as we think about where we should go? You'll also get a huge list of these things, and then we'll ask them to prioritize. And from those 2 things, the Council of Great City Schools will be collecting all of that data in the same fashion. We can talk about that at another time. And we're actually going to turn around a summary to the board and publicly, so everyone can see the entirety of what was shared and the trends that emerged from that. And with that document and that summary and the conversations that you were able to hear, you'll be able to actually then have a better sense of what's really resounding for the community to be able to set those goals and those guardrails. Here's a draft timeline and plan. Now, I recognize that we're already in mid-February here, so this might be too quick, and we might want to move this by a couple weeks. But essentially where the board landed was 11 meetings, 1 in each region, and then 2 virtual meetings. In order to align with the consistency, to make sure we had 2 trustees at each meeting, 2 directors at each meeting. And then not necessarily, well, it's fine if a director is in their region that they represent, of course, but not necessarily either. Directors can feel free to be in different parts of the city hearing different voices, because all of the directors together represent Pittsburgh collectively. There's a survey available throughout this time, and that in advance of this, whenever the first meeting would be, before that time, we would actually, at a board workshop or a meeting or whatnot, we would actually, as a board, spend time norming on facilitation. Shouldn't take more than 45 minutes to an hour. We could do it as part of one of these meetings, but just to make sure that everyone who will be doing this is on the same page about the flow of it, what the meetings look like, so there is consistency across the time. 11 total meetings with 2 trustees each, averages that each director would do 2 to 3 of these meetings over the course of that time frame. And if our discussion here tonight is this looks roughly good, we might want to make a few adjustments, and otherwise we're ready to start moving on. We will begin working with board services to coordinate where those meetings will be, make sure they work with director schedules, and then go from there. So what the rest of this look like is, again, the listening sessions would come next. Once those listening sessions are done, we, the Council of Great City Schools, would summarize all of that and turn it back around within 2 weeks to the board, and the community. And then at some point, likely in early May at this rate, the board would actually have a workshop to discuss what the community shared, what the administration has learned, the current goals, and then begin to start drafting what the goals and those guardrails would be. Once the board gives direction on those goals and guardrails, then the administration would take that and actually start thinking, all right, if the board is prioritizing early literacy, here are the progress measures that we're going to monitor around it. The board would then see all of this together, would get to review and provide feedback and have a discussion with administration. Administration would then revise it. And then hopefully on this timeline, the board would be adopting its goals and its guardrails for the next 3 to 5 years that really will prioritize this by July and August to start in the new school year. And then all of the monitoring, all of the work will be aligned to moving those outcomes over time. So that's the last of these overall. I would love to welcome any thoughts from board directors as well as administration, because administration will obviously be critical in doing some of this work. Again, none of this impacts the current year and the current goals. This is all forward looking. But if y'all have any feedback or thoughts or questions, we're happy to welcome them. Otherwise, we will begin working with board services to start putting some details on this and getting it out to you to approve and then get it out to the community.
Thank you, Ben. Thoughts, questions, comments from board members on this framework and plan? Ms. Talaferro.
Thank you, Mr. Walker, and thank you, Mr. Mackey, for presenting. So I'm just going to say this right off the bat, like, we just probably need to like determine a new time frame. March 1st is like next Saturday, and if if our board services and the administration need time to organize where those meetings are going to be located. I mean, if you have the confidence that you're going to be able to do it in a week, then by all means. But with the number of things that we have going on right now, I would just say, like, could we look at like maybe starting mid-March? Also keeping in mind there's Easter, spring break, so that might play a factor. But I would just like to just make that decision if we can at the board tonight, of a more appropriate and realistic time frame to starting this timeline. So that's just the first thing I wanted to say. But the second, honestly, is that I'm actually really excited that we are moving in a direction of making community engagement a staple for the board. Since I've been on the board over the past 5 years, the only community engagement that we've really had the only community engagement that we have had has been led by the administration, and has been administration's community engagement that the board was invited to participate in. It has not been traditionally the expectation of board members to have community engagement or host community engagement unless you're a board member who just really loves engaging with your constituency and you get out there and you pound the pavement and you do it yourself. And that's not really been an expectation of every board member. So I am happy that we are moving in this direction where it will become a part of the thread in how we operate as a board. And I do know that, like, we have done some isolated things, like when we added money to our board budget for community engagement with no like outline or expectation of what that looked like and what board members should do. So we've done piecemeal things when it comes to community engagement, but we've never actually made that decision of what that looks like for us as a 9-member board. So I am happy that we are here. And I am happy that we are doing some of the things that I hear people say all the time. And whether you support or like the direction that this board is going in when it comes to governance, we've never done anything at all when it comes to governance. So I think that, we are doing our due diligence in that space and doing what works for us as a board here in the city of Pittsburgh, and not in comparison to anywhere else that is doing this work. The other part that I really value in this process is building trust. And again, like engaging and interacting with people who have elected us to be in these seats, and building that trust, rebuilding that trust as a board, as a district, to me is extremely important. I hear the word transparency drop all the time, especially when we're in election season, when everybody's running because they want to solve transparency. And I think that this is a step in the direction to building trust and transparency in this district with this board. And that to me makes me happy, and it makes me proud that we can stand firm on that being a priority for us and building trust and transparency as a board. And then the last thing I will say is the piece about making space for the community to speak. That part has been really important to me. In our community engagement in the past, and especially the community engagement that we did around the facilities utilization plan, one of the biggest issues that I had with it personally, and I know that a lot of the people that I represent really struggle through it, is that we spent more time talking than we actually allowed and gave space for people to talk. And to me, that's problematic. If we are supposed to listen to community, if we call it a community listening session, but we do more talking than listening, then that's problematic. And I think that's the part that I really want to make sure, however we build out this format and the scripts and what we're going to say and the questions that we're going to ask and talk about, is that our voices are less than the people in the room, and that we're not going to give people 30 seconds to speak, but that's disrespectful. And I'm not going to disrespect the people that I serve in this city. Same people I have to see in the grocery store and at Target when I'm doing my retail therapy. So that's, those are the parts to me that really stand out, and what makes me look forward to being able to engage the community, and that their voice will be heard in the goals that we set, in a direction that we as a board challenge the superintendent to take us. So with that, that's all I got to say.
Thank you. And I take that note. This was put together, I think, back in January. So that's hence the March timeline, but I think your point makes sense. So based on that, and I assume it's a widely held sentiment unless others feel differently, and just knowing that it does take time to coordinate people's schedules, I'll recommend that we switch that to March 17th, which gives us at least a month to do that, and then go all the way through the end of April, unless other people feel strongly.
Great. Thank you both. Dr. Reed.
I see Ms. Wilson's hand before mine, but I don't know
Yours was first on my
Okay.
screen.
Okay, great. I was just, I agree with Director Talaferro that I'm very excited about the process. I'm very excited about us having a sort of a system by which we will listen to input. And I'm most excited that we will have some document that we can use to determine whether or not we're adhering to the desires of our public. So I just wanted to say that, and I did want to sort of echo the thought that if we are going to have this process, it cannot be one that we just listen and then go back and do whatever it is we were going to do anyway. It has to be one that we listen and we make substantive changes based on what what we hear from our public. within the parameters of what is good educational practice. So that's it.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson.
I agreed with the issue about the timeline, that obviously we needed to make a change. So I appreciate that coming up. I will have a question about the virtual. Why is it that we would have 1 in person and 2 virtual?
I believe you're having 9 in person, 1 in each region.
That's
And
not
then-
what I mean, but so 9 and only 2. See, I was interpreting it 1 regional and then 2 for each of those.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. It'd be
But
2. And
okay.
that's a great point on that is while obviously people will come generally to the one that's closest to their house and where they go to school, the intent is essentially anyone that wants to show up at any of them can feel free. So it's not necessarily this is the only one for you. It's just it was in my understanding of the board, what they wanted, making sure that we definitely were thoughtful strategically to make sure that there were listening sessions in all regions of the city.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Of course, we have people who will be at all 9 and will attend both of the virtual as well. I wanted to also note that in the past there were attempts for board members to have a meeting in their district, but it was very personal. It was not something that was at the direction of the remainder of the board. It was one person hitting an issue that one individual wanted, and that would this provides us for a standardized. Now, some of those that actually was fought, and that one particular individual at one time was very upset, but it was not at the direction of the board. It was, so this gives us a standard for all of the meetings. And I have been at listening sessions and when there were specific and granted, it was administrative direction, but one example would be community schools. We had lots and lots of input, and it was something that the board wanted as well as the administration. So there have been times when we had community listening sessions that was directed by both the board and the district. So, but however, I do appreciate having a standardized method of moving forward. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Director Silk.
Thank you so much. I also very much looking forward to this. And I was wondering, I would appreciate clarity, and I'm wondering if the public would also be interested in clarity around the steps, the meetings following the listening sessions. And maybe, Ben, if you could put that slide back up, just to walk through expectations around which of those conversations are like public conversations, because some of this governance work that we've been doing has fallen into the category of really professional learning for the board. And I would really love for as much as possible for these conversations to be public. And so I'd appreciate some clarity around.
All right, I think we're back on the screen, but not quite the one we wanted. Let me get to the right one. So this is the right one. So we fully agree. It is most effective since this is responding to the community as well as listening to your administration. It's our recommendation, and I believe I haven't heard anything otherwise, that all of it is public. 100% of it is public. And so I'll talk about this specific procedure first to answer your questions, but then that's not even where the community engagement stops. It's just where the definition of the goals starts, and that's where the updates take over. So the listening sessions, obviously public. This is the board directors listening to the community in the same manner, just taking it all in, and then we're summarizing that. When we summarize that, there will be a less than 5-page document that summarizes everything about the vision, everything about the values with the numbers, the percentages, the frequency that it's come, the different buckets that were talked about, etc. That would then be shared with the board, which generally in advance of this workshop that we would schedule, and these workshops generally range between 2 to 6 hours, depending on how much time a board really takes to get into that. And sometimes there's an agenda item beforehand where we will share the summary, and the board will review it at a public meeting like this. I'll walk through the summary, answer questions about it. Folks will ask and then be able to reflect and respond. Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't heard this before, but now I see it, or whatnot. So that's a public discussion, and the public has access to that summary document. And then the workshop itself would be public generally. This is a conversation in a public session. People can more than welcome to come and listen and hear the conversations as we go, to identify what do we want the goals to be? What do we want the values, the guardrails, whatever we want to call them to be? What does that mean? And then the administration definitely usually takes that back. Obviously, the administration does this work during their day job, so this isn't as public of a thing. But then they will bring back and say, okay, board, you said you wanted early literacy as a critical component of this. Here are the progress measures that matter, that align to that, that's going to help us know. That's another public conversation. The board does a smell test. Are those things, if we said early literacy, is that actually like progress towards early literacy or not? And that's a conversation between the board and administration. And then the board will get to a point where it's like, okay, we feel good about this direction. That's when the board usually, and it's our recommendation, that the board actually go back out to the community again. And it's a different level of feedback. It's saying, hey, we heard all of these things from you. Here are our goals and our values and the different progress measures that came up. While we're not asking you for feedback on wordsmithing them, we're asking you, does this generally reflect what you saw? Sometimes it's a public hearing, et cetera. So it's a different type of listening, but it's a continuation of that conversation. Board will take that into account and then eventually finalize those goals publicly. And oftentimes at that point, they live on the website, they live in all the plans, they are the foundation of kind of when we talk about budget next year. All right, how do the different new budget expenditures that we're thinking about align to us trying to move the goals that we set? Over the course of each month, the board will continue with its listening process. And so we'll know whatever those goals are or the guardrails or values, that some of which we might have already, some of which might be brand new. Those will all be public conversations. And then we'll work with the board to design whatever y'all want it to be, because it's our recommendation that there continues to be an ongoing two-way. Sometimes that's every 6 months. The board kind of does something like this, just one point to hear what's on people's minds. It's our recommendation that is always planned in advance, because in the absence of a planned time in advance, then you end up being reactive to whatever the problem of the day is and whatever the topic is. So you want those general ones. But that's part two. Once we have the priorities, what does the board and the community want to build out for those ongoing two-way listening? That is, to what multiple directors have said, that is a board listening session, not a board member individual listening session.
Awesome. Thank you so much for just making that incredibly explicit. I think it's important that folks know what our intentions are as we move forward here. And I also just wanted to underscore, because likely communications around this are going to happen rather quickly. I think it's incredibly important that that the 9 in-person meetings that communications around it don't emphasize the district number, but rather like the location and open, these are open to all, so that folks are picking the meetings that logistically work best for them, and are not kind of in the mindset of, well, that's not my district, so I'm not going to go to that one. Thank you so much. That's all I've got.
Thank you.
Any additional questions, comments, thoughts? All right. Well, then we will turn you over to Stephanie and the administration to kind of work out some of those details. Obviously, board members, let's check our calendars and start throwing out some dates that are going to work for us, and we'll get this moving. If there is nothing else, I want to thank you all for your time and attention tonight. We went through some really important stuff tonight, and we look forward to seeing you all on Wednesday. Wednesday, we have a slightly different format. We have our normal agenda review meeting, but we are also adding the rescheduled progress monitoring report from Dr. Walters on biology from earlier this month that needed to be canceled. So we look forward to seeing you for a slightly longer than normal Wednesday night But with that, please be safe, everyone, and we'll see you all in a couple of days.